So, A Link to the Past was released back in 1991. I think it was 1992 for the Super Nintendo. Somewhere around there. So, in other words, A Link to the Past was technically the third Zelda game, that was ever made. And what's really interesting is, in the Japanese version, it's actually called the Triforce of the Gods. Or what it translates to, at least. But A Link to the Past, they refer to, not like Link going back to the past, but a link. Like between the past and the present and the future. Now, A Link to the Past is actually considered by a lot of people. Now, okay, it's debatable, and I mean, I'm always open for debate, but some people have stated it's their favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, and, some people have actually said it's even better than Chrono Trigger, and I actually have to look into that. I really would like to know what people think about that. Chrono Trigger versus, A Link to the Past. Some people probably say A Link to the Past because it's Zelda, it's one of the greatest games of all time. But, is it overrated? Yeah, but, that means a lot of people appreciate the hard work that some of these people made, even many years later. Even though A Link to the Past isn't as expensive as Chrono Trigger, but hey, you know what? I love them both. And I actually own them both, so that's cool. But anyways, Link to the Past takes place in Hyrule, and, the reason why a lot of people consider it one of the best games of all time, aside from, the dungeons and the music, which, again, Koji Kondo did the music, by the way. Shigeru Miyamoto, I swear, he's always on a roll when he makes these video games. He knows, he just makes, talk about another chapter in Hyrule's legacy, and then we look at, the Book of Medora, for example, which is another item in Majora's not Majora's Mask, but the Zelda trilogy, and then they made a book about the whole Zelda timeline, the Book of Medora, talking about, or in A Link to the Past, it's an item that you get in the library outside of Kokoriko Village that you use in the desert, so you can get into the Desert Palace. So that way you can go fight the not Moldorm, but the sandworms or whatever they're called. Because, not to get confused with Moldrin, which is the giant worm that you fight in the Mountain Palace or something like that. The one that's on Death Mountain. Not in the Dark World, which is actually the Sacred Realm, but in the Light World. Now, anyways, the game talks about how, the Triforce, when the Triforce was really introduced for the first time, how, well, I mean, the whole story surrounding it, at least. Zelda 2 technically mentioned the Triforce, and so did Zelda 1. Again, mind you, the Zelda games, when they were released, based on release order, is not the timeline order, if that makes sense. It seems like the first Zelda games were actually the last games in the timeline, depending on how you look at it, But anyways, Ocarina of Time was the one game that pretty much separated the whole timeline. It was all these games were confusing to figure out, and some of these other games were really some people would really look at the timeline, and some people still to this day cannot figure it out. So Ocarina of Time, for example, was one of those games. It was a lot of people loved it, but it was one of the most confusing games to appreciate. So it was so many people played it, but only a few people have ever figured it out. Even though it's clear now what it is, but some people were confused on it. But anyways, A Link to the Past is not as confusing as Ocarina of Time is, sort of. If you think about it, Ocarina of Time, well, not Ocarina of Time, but Link to the Past pretty much talks about, how Ganon, was sealed in the Sacred Realm. They somehow, and they, he was there. He tried to get the Triforce, then they turned him into Ganon. So he kind of got his way, sort of, but at the same time, though, he couldn't get out of the Sacred Realm when he was trying to leave it. So, once they sealed him off and all that there, he eventually found a way to kind of break the spell a little bit by sending an illusion of himself, also known as Aghanim, to the future, or rather to the Light World. So once he found a way through that, he was trying to reverse it. And, what's weird is, he technically had the Triforce, but he couldn't use it in some aspects because, he was missing certain aspects of it, even though he knew exactly where it was at. Some people have stated that, the Triforce will split into three: power, courage, and wisdom. Link gets courage, Zelda gets wisdom, and Ganon gets power, which still gives him a lot of power, but, but anyways, with the Troll Triforce, though, you know, you can do a lot with it. You can turn things into, you can turn a whole land into pureness, or you can destroy it and turn it into nothing but ashes and dust and ruin, and, you know. But if it's anything I've learned, it's that the whole Zelda timeline, we can pretty much assume that, and pretty much clarify that it's like the gods testing mortals. They could easily destroy Ganon, probably, but they just let him keep coming back. You know, as a way to see, like, who can outright, you know, annihilate him. You know, so that's what happens with Ocarina, or that's what happens with A Link to the Past. You know, Link goes on a test, gets the Master Sword, you know, but the 6 maidens eventually get kidnapped and the spells broke, and they're sent to the Sacred Realm, which is not the Dark World at the time, which is the same light world we know, but, or not the light world that Link's from, but you get what I'm saying. But anyways, so what happens is, yeah, we find out that Link he has to prove himself to the Triforce, or to the Master Sword, so he's got to get the 3 pendants, and eventually he gets it. Only a few people know where it's actually at, and there's decoys all throughout the Lost Woods, but eventually he finds it nonetheless. And then after he finally gets it, then he is able to finally, like, he's able to finally take it, and then eventually, you know, he fights Aghanim, and then he sends him to the Dark World. Then he has to find the maidens. Then once he finds all the maidens, eventually he can take down, you know, Aghanim again. And then you find out that Aghanim was actually Ganon. And then eventually Ganon leads right to the Triforce, but, you know, he wants you to fight him before he gets it to you. But before that, he tells you that, you know, essentially he tells Link that, you know, he never could imagine, like, you know, he sent a whole army after him, and somehow they just couldn't kill him. Like, you know, so Ganon's like, okay, like, what the hell's going on here? And so Ganon, you know, he says to Link, like, it's probably like one of the best quotes in video game history I've ever seen. It's like, you know, he says, like, I could have never imagined a boy like you who could give me so much trouble. It's like, it's hard to believe that you destroyed my alter ego, the Dark Wizard Aghanim, not once, but twice. He's like, and he talks about how he'll just never give you the Triforce because, you know, he wants it for himself, and he'll completely destroy you and make his wish to, you know, to grant with Hyrule, you know, to rule Hyrule, all of Hyrule, without delay. But, you know, obviously you kill him, and you need the silver arrows to kill Ganon. You know, the only way to truly kill him is with the Master Sword and light arrows. What are the silver arrows? What makes the silver arrows so special? I don't know, but eventually they were changed to the light arrows, which are actually pretty cool. But Ganon's like immortal. I mean, in some aspects, you know, there's only a few things that will kill him. And once you eventually get those, you know, he's toast. He's not really, he's toast, but you're not going to want to use him as bread, though. Because, you know, he's going to crumble, and he's going to be nothing but crumbs. But anyways, so Ganon is probably a really cool villain, but, like, overall, you know, Koji Kondo did a really good job with the music. Link to the Past, you know, the whole atmosphere behind it, the monsters, the boss fights, the characters, the weapons items are just really cool, really well thought out, and there's plenty of hidden secrets, like, you know, like, you find money that somebody, like, you'll find, like, all these trails of money someone left behind, and there's people that'll just give you 300 rupees out of 999 if you find the right locations. They say, oh, here you go, I was holding on to this, but since you found me, here you go, you can take it. You got all these pieces of art hidden all throughout Hyrule Castle and all that. Got the flippers, the moon pearl, like the items like the fire rod and the ice rod. I always like how you found the ice rod, though, like at the beginning of the game. Like it's really cool because, like, you know, once you get the ice rod, you know, you need, it's just like where you find it at is really cool, because the ice rod is like one of the coolest weapons in that entire game. It really is, because it's there. It's there at the beginning of the game, and where you get it at, you get it inside a cavern of ice, and like the fairy music that plays when you go there, or even the Japanese version of a Link, they call him Rinku, like R-I-N-K-U, KU, which is actually pretty cool. I always thought it was also really cool because, like, when you think about A Link to the Past, like, you know, there's so many things that, like, all the boss fights, and then, you know, like, where you find the ice rod, for example, it's, like, in an ice cavern. Like, it's really, really cool. Like, the soothing melody that plays, like, Koji Kondo was awesome, Shigeru Miyamoto was awesome, and all of Nintendo was pretty much awesome, like, what they came up with. And, you know, I mean, you know, some people have to understand that, you know, even if the games they made were, like, a long time ago really good, but I also still think it's really cool that they're still able to make games nowadays. There's always still a good positive thing coming out of them, even though people have made legit claims that they could do better, too. But I'm happy either way, because, you know, I'm glad that they're still willing to make games for us. You know, I like that idea that there's more out there. Because that's what makes video games awesome. There's so many of them. But it's not like the video game Crash, where they said that there was so many of them that it was bad, though. There's so many of them that are good, though, but you have to sort through them. You know, some are better than others, but which one do you play first? You know what I mean? Especially A Link to the Past, you know? A game that, I mean, I beat that game so many times. I mean, I just recently beat it in one sitting without dying once. Okay, not really too hard to do, but it's like, considering if you save once and then turn the game off, you know, the game will count as a death. It's kind of like in Resident Evil 4, like every time you hit the retry button, it counts as a death, even if you don't die. Which is actually really interesting, but nonetheless, though, it's really interesting, though. Like what you can do with A Link to the Past. You know, like so many cool things you can do with it. And, I mean, I'll be honest with you, if you've never played the game, you should buy a copy of it. It is worth the money, and it's definitely something that it's worth the investment. So, again, comment, rate, subscribe, share this channel. You love the Zelda series and you want to play it, go for it. It's so cool, I'm not gonna lie, and you should totally check it out.